Hi, my name's Mark Bertin. I'm a developmental pediatrician, and I was asked to do something I've actually never really done exactly this way before, which is really to just create a short recording, a short talk around some simple practices we can use as physicians, even in the middle of a pretty chaotic time, even in the middle of real serious challenges. And I don't want to suggest that these practices are a band-aid or a fix for anything in particular. They're just an acknowledgement that when we're knocked unbalanced, when we're caught up in stress and autopilot, reactivity, and feeling overwhelmed, there's some value to having tools at hand that we can use to settle ourselves in any given moment. And clearly over time, if we connect with mindfulness, there are deeper practices and longer term practices we can touch base about. We can will talk about in the future more challenging concepts like how to live with uncertainty and some of the challenges and intensities of the experience. But for now, let's just talk about a few different things you can do in the moment as a physician. And we'll start with a basic breathing practice, which I invite you all to do right now for just a second or a few seconds. The concept with breathing practice is simply that with each movement of the breath, there's a physical sensation, and that sensation is, in essence, always here. It's not all the thoughts that are knocking us off balance. It's not the emotions that may be causing us to feel overwhelmed or taking over. And it's a way to adjust and recalibrate, to come back to catching ourselves and what are we meant to be doing in the next moment, or what would be the most valuable thing we can do for ourselves or for someone else. So as we start today, as I led in a recent practice, you can just take the next 7 breaths with that perspective and just breathing in 1, breathing out 1, and starting wherever you are, sitting or standing, breathing in 2, and out 2. And ending for now wherever you are. That simple practice is something you can come back to even in just after a crisis, or sometimes in a brief going into a really challenging moment. It's just a way to find yourself some ground, find yourself a way to settle down. Certainly it becomes easier as you become more familiar with it. A related practice people sometimes use is just grabbing your awareness, grabbing your attention or your thoughts, noting wherever you've been caught up, and focusing just on the feeling of your feet on the floor for a few moments. And you can bring these sorts of practices right into a conversation that you're about to have that's really challenging, or a decision you're about to make that's really challenging, and just come back to that breathing practice. You might even add to it, the fact that we all have to wear masks at times nowadays, and maybe that changes the physical sensation of breathing, and focus on what that feels like physically. So breathing practice is something we can always come back to. And then there are a few specifics during the day as a physician that also might be moments that you can get out of that. Moments you can, stress is often related not just to something challenging happening, but all the places our mind goes triggered by that challenge happening, all the stories we're telling, and all the different directions our minds are going. So a couple of places during the day you might be able to practice mindfulness. And I was asked if I was going to demonstrate this, but I don't think I have the technological capacities to make it look smooth. But you can bring that same type of awareness to hand washing, meaning you can hand wash and stay caught up in whatever is causing you angst, stay caught up in your mind. Or you can hand wash and bring full awareness to the physical sensation of the hot water, the soap. It's a counting exercise too in its own way. We're supposed to do it for a certain length of time. We can just note that physical experience as something that's real and right now. And again, we're not trying to force ourselves to feel any different than we are. There's an aspect of mindfulness practice that's simply acknowledging our experience and trusting that that has value. So it doesn't mean we're making ourselves feel good by doing that necessarily. but simply that we can bring for the 30, 40 seconds of hand washing our full awareness to that. And there actually was a study done a couple of years ago where they taught people to use mindfulness while washing dishes, and after a week of that practice noted some decreases in anxiety. So each time you wash your hands during the day can be an opportunity to catch a little break. For a few seconds, there's nothing to do or fix or change. It's a point of rest, in essence. There's a similar practice to that many of us teach, that with physicians is often called the doorknob practice. And that is an acronym. And that acronym is STOP. It stands for stop what you're doing, take a few breaths, observe, just check in with what's going on around you, what's going on internally. And the P stands for pick how to proceed. What's the most skillful thing to be doing? What's the most skillful thing to be doing next? So in medicine, it's often called a doorknob practice, but that practice takes a few moments. You don't lose any time in your day doing it. And each time you put your hand on a doorknob to be entering the next experience with another human being, a next individual experience, whether it's a patient visit or an administrative meeting, you could take that stop practice and just remind yourself, stop, take a few breaths. And if you've been practicing mindfulness, they can be with that sense of awareness of the breath, coming back to just a few breaths of, okay, what does it feel like when my body moves with each breath? And then the observing part is just checking in. It's not trying to force things to be any particular way. It's just noticing this is how things are. And the P is that, is intention. And when we talk about mindfulness, there are many, many layers to the practice of mindfulness. It starts with the assumption that if we can get out of autopilot, see with clarity, practice being settled, then we're going to see more often what there is to be doing, or maybe when it's time not to be doing something. And there's an intentionality to mindfulness. It's meant to be very purposeful in the big picture. We're acting with skill. And that stop practice is another way of doing that. And then I'll end by just reminding everyone that, in these challenging times, we need to take care of our own resilience in the big picture as best as we're able. And when we are doing something that's pleasurable, even for a moment, we can try to give it our full awareness instead of staying distracted or as quite often happens in life when things feel overwhelming, we're missing out. We're doing the things we enjoy, but we're not really mentally giving them any attention at all. So mindfulness is something we can practice with almost any activity in that informal way. We can give full awareness to a run in the woods or a run around the street if you're in a city, where you just notice when your mind isn't paying attention to what you're doing and then try to bring it back to the sights and smells and sounds. And even in the hospital, even in a clinic, if you have an opportunity to have a snack or to have a cup of coffee, eating or drinking can be an activity of mindfulness. Drinking tea or coffee, I would imagine, is what we're talking about here. But actually, all sort of joking about it aside, this is sort of the thing that, if for anyone who enjoys a glass of wine, is sort of that type of attention you sometimes give it to, where you give it your full attention for a moment. And that can be mindfulness in and of itself as well. So with eating, it doesn't have to be overly slow. It doesn't have to be done in a particular way. It's just, if you're going to be eating or if you're going to be having that cup of coffee, what are the physical sensations like? What does the warmth of the mug in your hand feel like? What does the taste like? You might even notice the color or the light playing off the surface of it. And again, it's just in a hopefully unforced way, an opportunity to give it your full attention. In this particular instance, it may be a way of building your resilience through fully experiencing something positive. Although, again, that's not inherently part of mindfulness. We're not trying to only pay attention to the positive. We're just trying to create balance in life. We're trying to recognize that there is something called a negativity bias, that our minds tend to stick with whatever seems off or overwhelming. It's a kind of a safety mechanism, and that it's valuable to try to create more balance when we can. So in a natural kind of way, just trying to bring our awareness and attention to whatever activity we choose. So I hope all of that, or some of that, can be tools that we can bring into even the most overwhelming of times. Because the bigger premise of mindfulness isn't that there is any perfect way to act, isn't that we're going to be calm or happy all the time. The bigger purpose is the understanding that we have to relate to whatever is going on and that we can choose to build skills or put our effort into things that help us sustain our own resilience, that are compassionate to ourselves, we treat ourselves well, and then clearly help us increase our capacity to interact with and be compassionate to everyone around us too. And that's a lot to ask of, but it all starts with, in any given moment, just settling and seeing what makes sense to be doing in that moment. It makes sense to be, what's the most valuable thing I can bring to this next moment in time. So I hope those practices have some value for you, and I appreciate your giving them some attention, and wishing you well and hoping everyone stays healthy and safe who's listening to this video. Take care.